Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I call myself the Messed Up Counsellor, which is quite an intriguing name. And the podcast you're about to see is one of many, and we've been doing about a year now. So you can look back and see all the things we've talked about with guests and on my own over the process. A lot of the information I use in the podcast initially came from the first book I wrote in 2011. Why do we do that? What do we do about it? And that came out and was the basis of all my learning, understanding at that time, which is going back a few years now. And that process of understanding how the world works for people, how we can alter, change, and adapt it, was kind of what it was there to do with the initial stages. I've made that now an audiobook as well, so it's available on Amazon as an audio file that you can check out and you can download to your heart's content, and hopefully that will be helpful. In the podcasts, we're trying to look at all sorts of things about human interactions, human dynamics, the world, and how we might understand it more or change it more. So it gives you lots of ideas and tools in order to think about and look at different ways of being or dealing with things. And hopefully that brings people together and makes people more able to connect and communicate. Lots of topics. If you ever want to connect to me, just obviously drop me a comment on the podcast and I shall try as much as possible to reply. And if you've got any ideas of things that we might want to use on the podcasts, then please let me know. My name's Ian Wallace. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening. Hi, my name's Ian Wallace and welcome to the Messed Up Counsellor. Today's session is talking about something that we get an awful lot in the counselling room with males and females, to be fair. Although obviously it's something different with females. With males, it's called erectile dysfunction, or ED for short. Females, it's vaginismus. So both conditions can be a physical problem, okay? So we always say to anybody that approaches us with these kind of issues, please go to your GP and get it checked out first and foremost before we do any work, because it can have an origin in a physical condition. So we need to take those out of the equation. Yeah. So if you do suffer from ED, please just go get it checked out by your GP first, or vaginismus, which is obviously the female process. For people who don't understand this terminology, erectile dysfunction means that men, generally speaking, can't get a hard-on. They can't get erect. There's some aspect of not being able to get an erection. For women with vaginismus, it's more about the muscles of the vagina clench shut and create very uncomfortable, very sore, and sometimes impossible processes of insertion. So once we've got the person to check out whether there's a physical problem, because obviously that's something we can't do anything about, the GP can, quite naturally. And they come back and they say, no, the GP says this is not something that's a physical problem. Then we use our skills to delve into the emotional aspect of the person's life. Now, that sounds mad that the emotional aspects of somebody's life could affect a physical condition. But when you think about it, the brain is the biggest sexual organ, and the brain controls everything in the body. Everything is coming from the brain. So when something happens in our bodies, the origin is through a process in the brain, usually with nerves or with reflexes or with movement or with any kind of process. So when the brain is picking up signals for men, for example, and women, as I've said, but men I'll focus on because I'm a man, is that the emotional aspect of the brain can create these physical conditions. Now, a lot of the time when I was working in GP surgeries, then we would get people who the GPs were not able to help They wasn't able to make those situations change, So we would call that psychosomatic illness. So what it means basically, there's something in the emotional or the mind that's creating this process. And it learnt me very early on that there was a lot of situation scenarios that people go through, find themselves in, that actually have got no real origin of physicality. It produces a physicality, but it's actually based in something that's either emotionally or mentally. And we see that an awful lot with all sorts of conditions, this psychosomatic. And what it does is it stops us doing something. I think, and I can't give you a guarantee this is true, but I think in my personal experience and my work, that if we don't deal with something emotionally, then that builds up a structure, it builds up a bigger situation scenario. What it does, I think, that it has to be dealt with. The body wants you, your body wants you to be as good as you can be, basically. So if there's something in your body that's a pain or a place that aches, that is consistent, it would need to be consistent, then that part of the body is usually where the mental and emotional processes will physically attack. So for me, it's my stomach. So when I was very young, I went to the doctor, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and became aware that it's about stress, it's about emotions that's not being dealt with, it's about feelings that have been out of control, the stress, the anxiety, the worry. So that would create a process in me which would, in a sense, target that area of my body. Because in me, that's my most vulnerable place physically. Let's put it that way. So now what I know is that if I'm got IBS, if I got those kind of situation scenarios, first of all, I look at the physical stuff, obviously, as we've said. But then I say, okay, so what's happening in my world, in my life? How's that stress? Is it emotional? Is it mental? Is it, my work? Is it my life? Where is it? And I kind of look at that now as releasing that stress or that pressure and anxiety that then actually relieves the physical problems. And we all suffer from that. But the body will always be targeting that area that you'll initially know of, that there'll be the place where nothing seems to get it sorted, basically. Now, erectile dysfunction is a bit like that in my world. So there's some kind of emotional trigger. Now, if you think of it, that the penis is a way of creating a process of performance for men. So if you can't get a penis that's erect, then there's this performance. You should perform. That should happen. It's not right that it doesn't. So what that does over a period of time, it builds up this kind of mental process of anxiety. And the more it happens, the more anxious we get, the more anxious we get, the more it happens. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we're looking at the emotional, mental processes in that person in front of us. And we're saying, okay, so if you need to have a non-erect penis to keep you safe, for example, then what is it about your world that you felt out of control over? Now, for a lot of guys, it'll be a power imbalance in the relationship. And it'll be a way of saying, okay, so if I have a non-close relationship with somebody, I pretty much can get an erect penis. Not a problem. But as that relationship becomes closer, more committed, more connected, more vulnerable, then it might be that the erectile issue will start, because it's my way of withdrawing that part of me to keep me safe. That sounds really mad sometimes when we explore it with people, but it does happen an awful lot. So we'd look at the relationship, we'd look at the process of that person's relationship status, how it works, how long they are, what kind of kind of frequency these kind of things occur? Have they occurred before? In those kind of things. And we'd look for patterns to try and understand why it is happening now. And if it hasn't happened at the beginning, but it's now happening, then sometimes it's about that change, that the relationship becoming closer, the relationship becoming more committed, more vulnerable, because the closer we get to somebody, the more we worry about them leaving, quite naturally. And the more we worry about them leaving, the more we would keep ourselves safe. So those are the reasons that can happen for ED. So it's about exploring that, exploring their world, their life, their relationships. Now, if, as we're exploring that life, we come to understand that they've had a disconnection process in their younger life, that might have set up this insecurity. It might have set up this fear of rejection or losing somebody that we weren't in control of. So that can set up, for some people, not everybody. Not everybody goes through these situations. For some, it's more susceptible than others. But it can set up a process of fear of rejection. Now, that fear of rejection would be an imbalance in the power and control dynamics of the relationship, quite naturally. So that might result in one of these two options happening. For females, the vagimus, and for males, ED. Because I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to be unable to survive. So I'm going to keep my power, I'm going to keep my control, I'm going to keep my situation safe, emotionally. I don't necessarily mean physically. So in order for that to change, we have to, as always, we have to first understand it, understand where it comes from, and understand why it's occurring. And what is it about that relationship that this moment in time, or when it happened, when it changed. And what was the relationship doing? And if we can look at that and we can see them patterns in previous relationships, maybe where the same thing has occurred, it doesn't have to be in previous relationships, it can be in this one only, then we can see whether or not there is this vulnerability issue with this rejection or kind of process of disconnection. Now, if that's happening, and it happens an awful lot, to be fair, in the situations I've seen personally, then we need to recreate an understanding of that original relationship status that created this disturbance. And we need to do some work on that, some closure on it, some understanding it, and to change our perception of it. Now, the problem with ED and vagimus is that, as I said at the beginning, the more something occurs, the more we think it's going to occur. So our mind kind of reinforces it. Yeah. So every time we try, we will get more and more of an obstruction. So what we'd have to do is we have to change our mind. We have to change the person's mind. Now, I can't do that. I can't change anybody's mind. I can change my mind, obviously. And people can give me an understanding of different ideas, different ways of looking at things, different thoughts, different processes, in order to change my perception of the world. And if I change my perception of the world, then I can change my reaction to the world, quite naturally. So it's about reinforcing that this is something that does happen to an awful lot of people, kind of normalising it, if you like, to say, well, it's not unusual. It's not you necessarily that's just the problem. This thing does occur with other people. And to kind of utilise the couple, the relationship, to support each other in this process of change. So from the partner's point of view, who isn't suffering ED or vagimus, then it's about reassuring them that it's not them that's the problem. Because it's normal to say, well, if you're not getting an erect penis with me, you obviously don't fancy me, you don't like me, you don't want me. And that would be a natural thought idea, obviously. So it's about trying to reformulate that as an understanding that, no, it's not you that's the problem. It's this other stuff that's the problem that we need to kind of understand and resolve. And then the couple can work together on it to reinforce the connection and make it safer, more secure, build in a process that challenges that fear of rejection quite naturally, and go forward building that relationship. And the closer we can make that relationship in communication, in intimacy, I don't mean physical intimacy necessarily, I mean emotional intimacy initially, then the more relaxed the two people will become, and the more they will build a process going forward where that relaxation, that intimacy will build quite naturally, and then it will have an effect on their physical relationship and their kind of process of getting together. And then we can go through some tools, some processes that we can use to bring that sensuality back to the relationship, which will normally, for most people, just do it on its own. We don't normally need to do an intervention. We can do if we need to from counselling point of view, but we don't always have to. And it's quite funny sometimes when we're working with that. And I don't mean the ED is funny. I mean the reaction of the clients. They'll get to a stage where they'll come into a session and we'll be talking about what's happening and what's going on. And they'll start giggling or start kind of laughing or giving each other glances. And then, are you all right? You know, what's happening kind of thing. And they'll say, oh, yeah, last night we did it, or something similar. And so those things will normally come in on their own. We don't normally have to have an intervention, but we can do if we need to. So that process means that the couple will solve the problem. That's more beneficial than the individual who has that original problem feels that they're the wrong one, they're bad, they're horrible, and the other one feels much more resentful of that quite naturally. So working together on that ED or vaginous process in a gentle way, not in a hard and fast way, relaxing each other, connecting to each other, building that intimacy will naturally create a different scenario in our heads. And we see that the relationship isn't going to end. They're not going to reject us. They want to be with us and they're helping us in this process. And we're helping them. It's a two-way street. And that process means that they will get a much better connection, much better communication. And as they do that, quite naturally, they will then build on that relationship, that intimacy, and that physical connection. So if you're going through these processes, then please just take a time out just to relax, just to not see you as the problem. The relationship is the problem. Get help. Sometimes it's not easy to do this on your own, to change it. Some people do, and some people can. But it's much easier to kind of work with it and understand it. And then together, both parties, kind of build a process to change it, to enjoy it, to relax with each other's bodies. The brain's a very wonderful thing, obviously. It gives us our view of the world and everything else in it, really. Without it, we don't function, you know. But it can be very confusing. It can take us down rabbit holes, confuse our thoughts, ideas, our understanding. And that's really not easy sometimes to work out on your own, because a lot of things we hide from ourselves, and thoughts, ideas can be changed and altered within the brain quite easily. We can dismiss things, we can deflect, we can do all sorts of stuff to keep us safe, really. So sometimes it's not easy to work on this stuff on your own. And the way it works is usually if there is a problem, it becomes more of a problem and becomes more entrenched, to be fair. So it's about feeling comfortable, feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling okay in your mind and your emotions. And then these barriers, if you like, which are there to protect us. Obviously, it's there helping us to protect ourselves emotionally and mentally. Doesn't need to. And if it doesn't need to protect us, then it kind of won't. So working together as a couple, working with that process of education, connection, can help enormously. And the thing for most people, vast majority of females definitely, they don't need insertion to enjoy and have an orgasm. They don't need that. They need that loving, intimate relationship. Now, that's not the same for everybody. Obviously, we're all individuals. But it's amazing how many men don't understand that it's not all about the penis. And sometimes that education itself can be helpful. Sometimes understanding our bodies, understanding our partner's bodies, can be a lot easier to work, have knowledge of, by both working together. You can't understand somebody else's world without interacting with them and talking to them and sharing things with them and seeing where they are in it. It's an interesting one when I hear people in the counselling room saying, I think. They really don't know. The clue is in the language. So if somebody says to me in the counselling room, I think they, I think he, I think she, I think them, or whatever they're saying, I automatically know that they don't know. They've not shared. They're not aware of the other person's position. It's an interesting one, but it gives me a lot of clues as to whether we need to do some connection, communication, education, those kind of things. Because that person who says, I think, it's all in their mind and it's all in their own world. They're not reaching out to somebody else. It's much better to know than think. If we know something, we can do something with it. We might not like what we know. We might not be comfortable with what we know. But if we know where we are, usually we're safer, we're more secure, more comfortable with it. We may not like it, but it makes us work our world better if we know things. It creates less anxiety and worry and concern. So don't think you know something. Find out, talk, share, connect. And then you will know. And that's much a better place to be, really. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hopefully what I've said today in this really difficult subject, erectile dysfunction and vaginismus, are not easy topics. We do not necessarily talk about them very often. But hopefully it's been a helpful journey of discovery, and that you're not going to beat yourself up if you're kind of suffering from those things. And get help, talk to people, share it. Professional help, I do mean, not pornography sites and things, which will give you the understanding, usually. And then we can have better lives, have better relationships, and obviously have more enjoyable processes. If you've enjoyed today, or you think it's been interesting, please subscribe, like, share, and do all the things that we love. And I'll see you again for another session sometime next week. My name's Ian Wallace. Take care. I'm the Messed Up Counsellor. Hi, thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully it made sense and was interesting for you. Please subscribe, like and share. With the podcasts, you never know who will be helped by the things we talk about, things we share. We don't normally tell people our problems, but by sharing it and helping other people to understand things. The book, Insecurity, It's All About Me, is also available now through Amazon. And it gives you an understanding of what drives insecurity, how insecurity works within our human dynamics, and how you can get a much more closely, much more secure connection with people it gives you lots of ideas and thoughts, which is really good. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, hit the button. And if you've got any comments, please give me them and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take care.